Can you be having a period while you are pregnant? Is that even possible? So welcome back, guys. Welcome back to my channel. Today let's look at the difference between implantation bleeding and a normal period bleeding. So I won't be doing so much. I'll just drop it and go, so I won't take much of your time. So the main difference between the two is the flow. For me, is the flow. Okay, so first of all, what is implantation bleeding? Implantation bleeding is that spotting, that bleeding that comes after the fertilized egg has reached the uterus, burrows into the uterine wall and start developing. So during the burrowing or during the nestling into the deep down into the womb, it's going to stimulate some vessels. Okay, it's going to cause some breakout of vessels while it was implanting, and this can cause some bleeding. Okay, that is what is called implantation bleeding. In the real sense of it, it's not actually bleeding, it's just spotting. Okay, it's just spotting. So for me, the major thing here is the flow. So how is the flow? In the implantation bleeding, the flow is more like spotting, not really bleeding. It's like spotting, and you may not need any sanitary product to take care of it. If it is much, that is when you can go ahead and use a panty liner. Otherwise, you might just not even notice it. Some women have said it was only when they went to the bathroom after wiping before they saw a tiny stain on the white tissue paper. Okay, otherwise there's nothing to be done. So in the real period bleeding, that is where you have a consistent flow of bleeding. Okay, it has this consistent flow, while in the implantation it's just drops. So for me, that's a major way to differentiate the two. So let's look at the color now. In the implantation bleeding, the color is light pink or brownish in color. The color is light pink or brownish. While in the real period bleeding, the color is bright red to dark red, or like wine red color, something like that, depending. Okay, so that is in the area of the color. And again, let me return back to the flow. In the implantation bleeding, is just drops, like I said. But in the normal period bleed, there could be some form of clotting. Okay, some clots might actually be present, but not as much clotting. Okay, that's another major way to differentiate. In the implantation bleeding, there are no clots. There could be clots in the normal period bleeding. Now let's talk about the duration. Duration matters. In the implantation bleeding, the duration is just, it occurs a few hours to about a day or two. But in the main period bleed, it takes about 3 to 5 days. Okay, 3 to 5 days. Okay, because some women have their duration of bleeding for 3 days, some has it 4 days, some has it 5 days. So it goes beyond, it goes from 3 to 5 days. While in the implantation bleeding, it just occurs between hours, within hours and a day or two for those who bleed more. Okay, let's look at when does it happen. Implantation bleeding occurs about 6 to 12 days after fertilization, between 6 to 12 days after fertilization. But in the real period bleed, you find out that it occurs towards the end of the cycle. Okay, and it occurs every month, and it is a sign that pregnancy has not taken place. So the implantation bleeding is 6 to 12 days after fertilization, While the period bleed is a monthly occurrence that happens towards the end of the cycle, and it is an indication that pregnancy has not really taken place. Another thing we should consider is the symptoms. How do you feel this bleeding? In the implantation bleeding, there may not be any accompanying signs. For some women, there are mild cramping, okay, but not so severe, not serious. But in the real period bleeding, there are likely to be PMS, premenstrual syndrome. Okay, there are signs like bloating, mood swings, fatigue, obviously the period, headaches, tiredness, and a whole lot of other symptoms that could be present, tenderness of the boobs and all those things. Okay, they accompany the normal period bleed. But in the implantation bleeding, there may not be any other symptoms to accompany the bleeding. Not really bleeding, like I said, it's called spotting. So for me, this is how I see the difference between implantation bleeding and the period bleed. Do you have any other thing we can use to compare the two? Let me hear your experience in the comment section. Have you ever felt, are you married, and have you ever experienced implantation bleeding? According to research, not every woman will experience implantation bleeding. Only about 25% of women will experience implantation bleeding, and that does not mean that implantation has not taken place. It only means that you didn't really experience it, and it doesn't really matter. It has nothing to do with the health of your pregnancy. It has nothing to do with the outcome of your pregnancy. It's just something that occurs once in a while, or occurs in one or two people in a particular given population. So if you're pregnant or you're trying to conceive, just go ahead and enjoy whatever experiences you're having. Even if you're not having implantation bleeding, don't bother about it. It has nothing, to add or subtract from your pregnancy journey. Thank you so much for watching. I don't mind having your experiences in the comment section. Thank you so much. I advise you subscribe to my channel. I really need this support.